Hello and welcome to the Film Ireland podcast, where we celebrate filmmaking, storytelling and cinema across the island of Ireland. Whether you're a diehard film fan or you just want to learn more about the screen industries, make sure to subscribe so you can listen back to our extensive back catalogue. And in today's podcast, we are really delighted to welcome back two of our guest contributors. So later in the episode, Dolapo Agunbiade chats with writer-director Adam Mura about his new indie series Midlands Mayhem. But first, contributor Will Penn chats with Irish-American harpist Joy Shannon, who has recently released a new album in the forest singing Sorrowless in late November, and the record, the lyrics of which are inspired by the poetry of J.R.R. Tolkien, includes a collaboration with his great-granddaughter.
Very nice to finally meet you, Joy. And, like I said in the interim, really nice to actually sort of put a face to, the lovely music that I've been listening to all day. I'd really love to sort of begin with your most recent album, In the Forest Singing Sorrowless. I'd really love to get like an impression as to why Tolkien, why this sort of years long sort of infatuation with Tolkien.
Well, I've always loved Tolkien. It was actually probably the first book, or Lord of the Rings in general. It was the first book that I really got into as a teenager, really. And it was actually saying a lot because I am dyslexic, so reading was always challenging. But I could not put that book down. So that was like my first book that I ended up just loving. And it inspired me so much at that time that, it was actually right before the films came out. So I feel like maybe I was the last generation that read the books without seeing those amazing films. And then when the films came out, it just amplified how much I loved everything about it. But fast forward many, many years, I've put out a ton of albums. I love creating music. I do lots of film work and, created a life doing what I absolutely love to do. And then I get hit, just last year, I got hit with a breast cancer diagnosis. Well, I'm doing great. And I had the best of all diagnoses because I was stage 0. So I had a lot of options. It still was very stressful no matter what. And I thought, I think this is the time I want to revisit music about Tolkien as something that I always wanted to do. But it felt like the right time because I needed to feel grounded and focused on the things that drive me, that really matter to me. And it was like going back to my childhood sense of everything that had originally inspired me to become who I am. So it was just, I guess it was a self-nurturing choice that I did to write the album and record it and just make it something that was inspiring during a difficult time.
I think that's really interesting. And when I was reading a little bit about the album, I understood that, some of these songs were actually songs that you had written a long time ago and then sort of revisited. And I think that's a really interesting process. Was that a part of that wanting to revisit that, the set of things that, drive you? Is that what it was?
In part, I've been doing what I do in music for, 20 years now. And of course, when I first started, which the song on this album called Faramir was one of the very first songs I ever wrote. So that is about a 20-year-old song. And I never recorded it to my liking before. So it was a way to be able to be like, no, I have the skills now. I can make it sound exactly how I envisioned it way back then. And I, have an amazing producer to work with. We can make this happen. So it was just a way kind of to bring it all together. It was kind of a full circle moment of, songs from over the years. And of course, some of the songs are also brand new to me as well too. So
yeah, I think it's a really exciting thing that you're able to revisit those songs and sort of polish that off in a way to sort of close that, but then also explore something kind of new through that. I was really excited listening to the album, not only to sort of see, Ruth Tolkien's name in there, but then also to see Maria France's name. The legendary Maria France. What was it like working with her on this?
Well, I've actually worked with her twice now, and my first time was 3 albums ago. I recorded an album called The Cave, and I recorded it at her studio in Denmark, and got to know her through that time. She's a wonderful and just transcendent, like incredible singer. So she did sing on one of my songs on the cave just because she was there and we were having fun. But it felt very, very special to have her on this song in particular because she's on the song called Grey Havens, which is about the elvish afterlife, and her voice sounds like elves to me. So she brought that element of like the elves of Lothlorien, singing, from the other side, essentially.
Yeah.
But yeah, it also felt very special because Ruth Tolkien is also singing on that song. So it was us three, and it just felt like a really just beautiful collaboration. And they both women are the nicest people in the world. So
yeah, really cool sets of collaborations on the album that I, when I first read about it, that I was, I was intrigued by it, but then to actually see like how lived in it was and how authentically like folk music it was too, in this like very new and exciting like wave of folk music that we have nowadays, I think is really, really cool.
Wonderful.
And so I'm kind of interested as well, like to return a little bit about, what you said about your breast cancer diagnosis last year in terms of, making the album and sort of recording the album. Was it a sort of cathartic experience to sort of undergo that as, as your health was, as you sort of had to have that sort of reckoning?
I think it was more of a normalizing experience that I was choosing to do. If I had songs that I was working on and I could keep myself inspired, I'd go home from, hospitals to do something that I really love. So it helped me. It was more of a mental health choice.
Yeah.
And I chose songs to work on that I just absolutely adore. So it was fun. And then also, having my friends sing with me on it also helped me because, I stayed in touch with everybody, and, some of my best friends are my musical collaborators, so it was, it was just all around a good choice for me to stay happy and grounded during a stressful time.
Yeah, amazing. I really like what you said. It's like it's more of a normalizing experience, I suppose at that time you want to connect with something that makes you feel yourself and feel normal.
Yeah. Although, there was a time when we were recording that I had to go do radiation every single day.
Right.
And it was funny because I have a service dog, so I did bring my dog with me to radiation, which ended up being also kind of normalizing because everybody there looked forward to see the dog. He's a really sweet dog. And but every day I had a different friend that went with me. None of my friends go alone, which was really kind. And I laughed because we were all like the dark looking witchy people showing up with my dog in tow. I'm sure we brought some life to that place.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure it was like kind of a lot of color that kind of place needs. And I guess like, to kind of maybe segue into sort of upcoming projects. Obviously, like folk music is, such a massive part of your artistic background, and it's so much to do with, who you are as as an artist. I'm really excited to hear in your words, like what you see as, how you see this upcoming, documentary project, coming forward into this year as well.
Right. That was another project that did come out of everything I experienced last year. It's something that I've thought about doing for many, many years. Yeah. And of course, something like a health diagnosis has a way to make you go, well, life's too short. I guess I got to do it now. And I thought, well, why not? I have many, many more years to come, hopefully. But it still gave me that impetus to think, I've always wanted to do this. This is a big part of who I am, what I've written my music about for my whole life. So it is also another kind of full circle moment. The documentary is inspired by my family's history in Ireland. My grandmother was one of the many thousands of women that were put in those mother and baby homes associated with the Magdalene laundries, which is a term that a lot of people know. They were awful institutions where women were forced to be there if they were pregnant out of wedlock or things like that. And that's why my grandmother was there. She had my father in one of those institutions. And that had always loomed kind of over our family because when I was growing up, my father was looking for his mother. And he actually found his birth mother when I was about 8 years old. So I was very aware of the process and aware of how much it meant to him. So it really shaped me as a person and as a woman, because learning that was something that your grandmother went through. It felt like I was suddenly thrown into a world that I didn't quite understand at all, and as a woman felt vulnerable to. So I learned, I think that probably sparked my quest to understand Irish culture, to understand the history. So I've spent a lot of my life and a lot of my music writing about Irish history or writing about women's stories. And then I also got, very obsessed with ancient Irish history from there, like all of the goddesses. And in a sense, I think I was always trying to recover parts of the Irish story that maybe could bring healing to the story that my family had experienced, the injustice that had happened to my grandmother, many other women like her, just being mistreated just because they're a woman. Essentially, there's no other real reason. So yeah, I finally came to this place where I thought, I've artistically danced around this subject matter for many albums, and I thought, let me actually directly deal with it rather than. I have many songs that are already there that are going to be part of the soundtrack of this documentary. And I have a few others I'm working on at the moment that are going to be part of the grander soundtrack of it. But essentially, we decided, myself and my film collaborator that I work with, or have worked with for the past 10 years on all of my music videos, we decided, one, we love working together, but two, we have been both talking about this subject for a long time. This is something that we've done so much research already, and we just felt like it was the time to do it. So we've built a really fascinating approach to something that's historic. We are telling the story through mythology and the different sites that these historic events happen at. We're telling the mythology of that particular land. So it's really grounded in not only the old stories of Ireland and then mixed with the more recent history, but also the Irish language as well. We're really I don't know, finding ways to tell the story in a I guess maybe a way that's similar to how I told it through my songs.
Yeah. And I mean, looking at your work, I was struck by how much, Irish mythology kind of does feature in your previous works, whole albums like dedicated to this. And then what's interesting, I was sort of like piecing it together. So you have this sort of like more global, more sort of broad flow of like history and mythology. And then there's actually within that, there is now a story that you're telling about your sort of your own family, sort of the way that you relate to that. How has that been in terms of even sort of like shifting gears artistically, I suppose?
Well, what's interesting is when I first started writing music as a teenager, as we all tend to do, we write about ourselves, right? We write about our feelings. And I did start that way. And then there was a point, I remember somewhere in my early 20s where I was like, you know what? My story's not as interesting as all of these other stories around. So I started to branch out from that self to writing about history, writing about myth. But it was always, I know it was from my own point of view because I was writing about other stories from an emotional point of view where I could wherever get into it. But in essence, though, I did try to branch away from my own story for a long, long time. And then I found, the more you look outward, the more it comes back inward, and you realize, oh wow, so many other people have experienced so much that I can relate to. What is going on here? There's so many themes that are incredibly relatable, and also in mythology as well, incredibly relatable. So many themes about dysfunctional families, right and left, and injustices and all sorts of stories I can get very passionate about. And then I realized it is profound that maybe it is the human condition, but we repeat cycles all the time. We're repeating mistakes all the time. So essentially, I guess one big full circle, I came back to the kind of origin story of my own family and my own identity, because I'm the one cousin who lives in California. The rest of my family is, in Ireland. And
oh, really? Okay.
And I always felt like essentially what happened to my grandmother in Ireland is how my dad was adopted by an American-Irish family. They were from Ireland too, but they had moved to Chicago. And that's essentially how I ended up here and was raised in California. And it kind of played into me trying to understand, where I come from as well.
Yeah.
I never quite felt fully American, never quite felt fully Irish when I'd be back there. But I was always deeply fascinated by learning the language and learning about the myths, learning about all of the sites around me. And of course, I do play a very Irish instrument.
Yeah, of course.
I was drawn to that. Just it felt like it was part of my heart and soul, Irish harp. So I don't know. I guess it is my journey of understanding where I come from, all the way to now.
Yeah, and I suppose there's a lot written in like sociology about like, in America, no one is really American, right? Like everyone is sort of has that hyphenated like identity in like a true sense. But then I guess like it's interesting to hear you describe it as like, your own sort of search for identity when, it obviously like was a like deeply shameful like part of, Irish history that the country is still trying to figure out. And even if I try and think about like the really like notable films that have come out in the last couple of years, like Small Things Like These. Then there was also Testimony, which came out last year as well.
Oh, I didn't see that.
Yeah, that was a really, they're both like, it's a really like powerful documentary, and you get a lot of accounts of, women who are in Magdalene laundries, like talking about their experiences, and it's like, and you hear it and you think that you've sort of understood the gravity of it, and then you see it again and you're like, wow, this was so normalized in society, so kind of hushed up. And there is that kind of cinematic address, right? Like people are trying to talk about it, like, on screen. How do you sort of see the role of music in taking in either sort of addressing or even, beginning to sort of establish a conversation around that?
Well, music was my first way in to talk about it when it was very kept hushed up, even in my own family.
Yeah.
It was something that it was looming over us, though. And I remember the very, very first time in my whole family's, life that anyone openly talked about it was when Sinead O'Connor ripped up the picture of the Pope. I was a musician. This is what's happening. She was utterly misunderstood for that action. But the people who understood it, like my father, he knew why she did that, and he was reeling from his experiences in those places because, he lived in them for almost about 4 years of his life before he was adopted. So he had some experience in how awful those places were.
Yeah.
He got it. And it felt like she was finally opening up a floodgate of silence to be heard finally. And I thank her for that all the time, Um, but yeah, I think that music, I observed it in my own father growing up, that he had so much. I see it now, I think, from his experiences and my grandmother's. I think everyone was dealing with PTSD. So there was a lot of things that I didn't quite understand as a child that they were experiencing. But the second that anybody played a song, sang, sat down with guitar, everything was peaceful and beautiful. And it felt like all of the anxiety of the world melted away. So in a sense, music was the original avenue to get at the core issues of this in my own family. That's how I with it, how I first was able to speak openly and truthful. I always felt you could say anything you want in a song, but you can't always say it in a sentence out loud. And now I can. Obviously, I've worked really hard to be very open, and obviously making this documentary is being very, very open. But I'm able to do that on the backs of so many people, so many survivors who fought to have their stories be heard already.
Yeah.
And I'm a granddaughter of it, and I think that's my point of view from how I'm orienting the documentary. Is like, we're really talking a lot about intergenerational trauma and healing. It's not only my grandmother's story, it got passed down to me in all of the kind of emotional fallout from it. And I hope that my documentary and all of the music part of it can be part of the conversation. One small aspect of the conversation. Yeah. Lots of Irish people have already been speaking about a lot. And I'm very grateful that I'm part of the generation that is able to be so much more open about things. But because of some fighters before us,
Yeah.
I did learn I was speaking to a Swedish friend of mine, and he said that they had the same places in Sweden. And they talk about them, but they had these places for unwed mothers, and they were very abusive as well. And I was like, well, okay, that's kind of a relief in a weird way to say, okay, Ireland wasn't the only one doing this. But I do think that Ireland is doing a good job talking about it. At least I hope that it's part of the healing process to be out with it and try to create a better world for young women.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that even, I don't know necessarily, I probably wouldn't know enough about it, like from a political or, restorative justice kind of like sense, but at least we have like some faith that, artistically at least there is some like push towards that. And in many ways that kind of like gets me onto, kind of gets back to the original question of like the way that we see art and see music and see film as an opportunity to have these safe places, to have what we can't say with words, trying to find that.
Yes, that's why it's been so important to me. It's a beautiful way to find common ground, and I think I used to be an art teacher. One of my favorite things and when I would teach was I would give all my students an assignment, and then all of a sudden everybody would get quiet and just be focusing on what they were doing. And I always felt like, one, all of us are creative. All of us have potential to do something beautiful. And we all have that spark inside of us. But I always felt like if everyone was doing that, the world would be a better place.
Yeah.
I think a lot of violence and frustration and all of that comes out of unrealized creative soul who hasn't figured out they should be in a punk band,
Yeah, exactly. Definitely. So I'm also interested as well, obviously you have an incredibly creative background, but how has it been actually sort of like changing gear a little bit and actually trying to realize this vision cinematically rather than musically?
It is very much a different medium, but it does go hand in hand, because I think when I compose music, I have visuals in my head.
Oh, okay.
And the hardest part is trying to communicate what those visuals are. Luckily, I can draw. So I draw storyboards. I create all sorts of, vision boards. And I am working with a film crew that I've worked with for 10 years. So we have made a ton of music videos together. And we've been able to realize in some really amazing ways my vision of what the imagery of the songs were. So I think the way we're treating this documentary is actually kind of like an extended music video in a strange way, just because we've worked together in the past. I think essentially, yeah, it is a totally different medium, but I am approaching it like music.
I like that idea of it being sort of like, of you still thinking about this, like, more visual project, but thinking about it musically, and that's like sort of the place that grounds you, to then sort of try and realize the sort of, the visual elements to what you're thinking musically. I think it's really interesting to hear you describe it that way. I guess just in the sort of like, maybe to wrap this up, what is your hope for this project? What is the key thing, the key image that you're trying to sort of realize, or key idea?
Well, I think the maybe ultimate key idea that I've been searching for in all of my visuals and in the music videos to this documentary has been to be able to visually describe what a feeling of the land of Ireland feels like. I think I'm talking about the spirits of the ancestral land. It's something that I had, growing up in California, heard Native American friends of mine speak about, that when they go to their ancestral lands, they feel it. It feels different. And I felt that the second I went to Ireland, and I went as a child many times, but I always felt it was different. You can't explain it other than it's like, it feels like home, and it feels like you're coming home. And my father once asked me actually like why I loved Ireland so much, because he associated it with so much pain.
Yeah.
And I said, as like 8 or 9 or 10-year-old, somewhere around there, I said, because all the ghosts are happy to see me when we get there. And I'm sure I creeped my parents out a lot. But that's how it feels. And I think that's what I've been trying to describe. Just the spirits of the place. I didn't have the words for it. I just called them all ghosts when I was a kid. But like, it's that energy. So I think in the documentary, I'm trying to describe the energy of the land around the site where my grandmother was imprisoned. Right. I'm trying to describe the energy of the land in some of these ancient sites as well. Kind of bring those stories alive.
And I suppose as well, like, for folk music, there is that sort of like real emphasis on, being connected and like seeking connection, whether that be with sort of, ancient stories, or feeling connected to other people, or feeling connected to the land. But then, what strikes me is that you also have this like, a sort of new strand of connection, of feeling very like quite literally connected to a place, like through your ancestry. And that's sort of, it's a very interesting, very fascinating idea.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Well, Joy, thank you so much for the wonderful conversation. It was really inspiring to meet you, and I really look forward to seeing this project when it's fully realized.
Oh, thank you. I hope I can speak to you again, when we're putting it out into festivals and such.
So now Dolapo sits down with writer-director Adam Mura about this new indie series, Midlands Mayhem. So have a listen to the trailer here.
What was the last thing you did that didn't involve drink? You got out once before. Why did you come back?
I came to seek you out. I'm in danger. I need your help.
Right, there's a lad called Ed going around, and he's picking us off one by one. We're just trying to figure out why.
What if the world had you convinced that you were a monster? Then what's the fucking point in trying to be better? The world's not going to give you a fucking chance anyway.
Everything's going tits up, Kieran. We were fine before Ennis came back. And now they're all obsessed with him.
Ennis! Ennis!
I think we should stay here.
The way I see it, though, is the way we are, we're sitting ducks. Either we go for him or he comes for us eventually.
I miss this. It's just like the old days. It's good to have my friend back, you know?
I came back here to drink, relax, not to deal with lunatics every day, not to be your bodyguard, your errand boy. So this is the last one.
Don't try that quick! I want nothing to do with him!
Hello, welcome to this Film Ireland podcast. My name is Dolapo Agunbiade and I'm one of Film Ireland's contributors. Today I'm joined by writer, director and villain Adam Mura, and we're going to talk about his recently released 5-part Irish comedy crime series Midlands Mayhem. Welcome, Adam.
Hi, how are you doing?
Doing well, how are you?
Just excellent, just excellent.
Good to hear. So I guess the first question is, how did you get into film?
That's a multifaceted question, I'd say. I think I always had like an initial fascination with film. I was thinking about this the other day when I was rewatching The Matrix, that when I was like 13 or 14, I watched the first 2 Matrix movies like 30, 40 times. Like, I used to watch them like every night before bed. And I think I just always had a fascination with what was going on with the TV, and I don't know if that was like my personal disposition as a person, not wanting to like go out and socialize and play with the other kids, but I liked being entertained by the television.
And was there something about The Matrix that it wasn't a different movie like Tarzan or one of like, Disney specials?
There was obviously a bit like I was maybe too young to be watching it, although like, 13, 14 is probably fine. But like it's also just very like, it's a cool movie for a teenager, you know what I mean? Like, it's got the aesthetic, it's got the fight scenes. Yeah, there was a lot to it that made me really think about film. But then like going on from that, like after school, I was sort of like really not sure what to do with my life and like what to go into in college. So like I took a year break and I spent a lot of the time watching television shows. So I watched shows like House MD and Suits, and after I've watched all of House, I was like, oh yeah, what if I was actually a doctor? And then I watched Suits and I was like, oh yeah, what if I was a lawyer? And then I was like, no, actually, what if I just made TV shows? Actually, that's so all of those 2 things sound way too hard. Not that TV isn't hard, but it's hard in a not needing to know science or law way.
Yeah. And so you ended up going to film school then after this break?
Yeah, I did, yeah.
And where did you go?
I did a PLC in DFEI, and then I went to TUD afterwards.
And so did you find that you were able to find other filmmakers and like-minded people who wanted to make film in TUD?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, my co-producer and DP, Shane, is from my class. Our sound person, Dan, also was in our class. Our color grader was in our class. A couple of our writers were in our class. And Mad Jack's actor, Connor, was in my previous film class. And Seshica, the character, was also in our film class. So there was a lot of crossover.
Did you find that you all kind of had the same vision? Or actually, no, before we get to that, where did the idea come from? Was it initially your idea or someone else's?
Before myself, William, who plays Ennis, and Tristan, who plays Canner, we were making like sketches just sort of for ourselves that were like not public. And we had an idea. They were sort of like serialized sketches because they were just for us. So they were filled with tons of in-jokes. And we decided to go like a bit more all out for the 4th one. We did the same for the 3rd one, but the 4th one we were going to do even more. But it turns out that the main person who was working in that dropped out. So we're like, okay, right, it's time. We need to do something, and something that we can show publicly because we think our skills have developed enough. And through that, we can develop our skills even more. And that led to us making the first episode of Midlands.
And did William and Tristan also go to film school?
No, they didn't actually, which is surprising because they also had like a keen fascination with it, such as myself, and they didn't go down the film school route, and that's like not an uncommon thing from what I've heard. Like a lot of people don't go down the traditional college route for it, and that's helpful when you know people already that are interested in film. But like the thing that I found most useful about film college was getting connections.
I was reading your press kit, and it said that you started Midlands Mayhem in 2022. Did COVID-19 affect your process at all, or was 2022 just the beginning of writing?
If I remember correctly, the COVID-19 lockdowns had like fully finished by the time we were shooting, if my timeline is correct. So it did kind of affect our previous like sketches that we wanted to do, because I believe we had one set and then it got delayed because lockdown happened, and then there was that brief period where the lockdowns were you were free to go anywhere except like Kildare, I think it was. It's been a while. So in short, no, it didn't really affect Midlands, but it did affect previous things before that.
You spoke a little bit about this, how you had different writers on the show. How was that process like? Did you have writers' rooms where everybody had an idea in mind, but they could do whatever they wanted with the episodes, or how did that work?
Yeah, no, we did hold a writer's room, which was incredibly fun. And then every time I see in the news that, like, you know, series aren't doing writer's rooms anymore, I'm like, oh no, that's kind of sad. But yeah, so the way that we approached the writer's room was I had like a specific set of things that needed to happen for the overall plot to get us to the ending. And sorry, I should qualify as well that we made the pilot first, and then we were like, okay, now it's time to commit and make the rest of it, rather than us starting from the initial 5-part all in one. But to continue back to what I was saying, we had approached it with, I probably shouldn't spoil the show, but let's say certain character needs to do certain thing in this episode, same thing for the next episode, and we need to get to this point. And then from that, myself and the 3 other writers sort of pitched ideas on what to do and how to end the show and how each episode should progress. And the way it actually worked out is each of the writers sort of got to deal with their favorite characters more explicitly in their episodes, more specifically with 3 and 4, with Kieran, who wrote 3, and Connor, who wrote 4.
Do you have any favorite characters?
You know, I flip between who my favorite character is. For a long while, it was Max, because he's very, very funny. And then I was like, oh no, actually, I like Mad Jack because of his arc. And then I was like, oh no, actually, Ennis is pretty cool. But I think right now I like Seshica the most, actually. And I think it's sort of just like her conniving ways, without spoiling, that I find very entertaining.
Just quickly going back to, you said that you filmed the pilot before you started the writer's room for the rest of the episodes. So who wrote the pilot?
I did. I wrote the pilot. It was sort of like, there was a bit of elements from the like extended sketch that we did before, but like it was more conceptual rather than actually taking specific plot points from the sketch thing. And
from the pilot, why did you decide to continue on the television route and not say, like, guys, let's do a movie?
Yeah, that is an interesting question. It's something I had considered before, and I think it's a bit about finding your voice as a creative. So, of course, this is my first big project, and I think it turned out very well. But there's a bit of inconsistency I've seen with some indie projects, where some scenes are a lot, how to say, there's less consistency within them. Whereas even you can see with like some shows like, say, The Office, people sort of find their voice and character through the first season of the show. And that sort of development was really exciting to watch within Midlands.
So the project was self-funded. How did you go about that? Or was that always your plan to be self-funded, or did you try to get funding at all?
No, it was always planned to be self-funded. I think this is a much broader topic discussion, but like from what I've seen from trends in the general film industry, it seems that generating your own audience and like self-funding projects are becoming more and more common. And even like paying attention to sort of the film side of TikTok, there's a lot of people who would be industry professionals who are sort of generating their own audience in a similar way to promote their own projects. And it would obviously be a struggle to find funding. Not that it, no matter what level you're on, it's always a struggle to find funding. But we had the enthusiasm, and just with the way that the industry is trending, I think it's better to just go out there and do it and not wait for approval.
Do you think that maybe in the future you would try to apply for funding for things, or because it's worked out successfully for this, you think that you can continue self-funding?
It's definitely worth investing the time into, for sure. But specifically in regards to the next project, I've saved a decent amount from my day job to go towards, well, it'll be a movie. So it's not that I wouldn't go for funding, and there's a level of like creative freedom that you get from not being tied to any sort of funding source. And obviously that's nowhere compared to movies that are like $200 or $300 million, but there is sort of levels of expectations. And there's a bit of it as well that like I need to prove to myself that I can do it. Maybe that's just my disposition as a person, that like I'm sort of on a, not a solo venture, but see myself as a bit of an outsider.
Well, even though I guess you would classify Midlands Mayhem as being a low budget project, even though it is low budget, I think that there is a lot of high value. And one of the things I noticed is that you have a lot of locations. Like, it moves from scene to scene very seamlessly. How did you go about getting these locations? Were they free? Were they through connections?
They were mostly through connections, actually. And it's very fortunate because we primarily shot in the town of Kalookan, where William is from. And because of that, we had a lot of connections to the local area. I'd say like 90% of it was shot there. And it was really, really helpful because a lot of the like community members were so accommodating for what we wanted to do. And actually, just fun aside, I remember we were shooting one scene and a dad walked by with his daughter and got a photo with us. I was like, oh, this is actually very sweet.
Not to give too much away, but there is a pub scene in the final episode. So how did you go about renting the pub? Was it the same thing again, connections and people just letting you use their facilities?
Yeah, no, it was connections. Fortunately, that was someone within the Ennis family. So that was very helpful. And they let us shoot there when they weren't open. So that was very, very helpful. And the intro is actually shot in a separate pub in Kinnegad, actually, now that I think about it.
I was actually going to bring up the intro. I think that it's so, so clever. Obviously, when people do tune in, they'll get to see it. Or when someone twists the beer bottle to then see the name of Midlands Mayhem and also the main cast. I think that's brilliant.
That was actually a suggestion from someone. Thinking about that, there was one of the things that we didn't get to execute just with how the show was made and why we decided to go with that intro. But initially what we wanted to do was similar to, I don't know if you've seen The Boys, but the way, like, there's a specific scene in the first season, I think, where they drive away and it reveals the like logo of The Boys. We wanted to do something similar like that. It didn't end up working out feasibly, but that might be something to investigate next time.
Once again, in Midlands Mayhem, you have a variety of roles. Was it always your plan to be one of the actors within it? Or was it that no one fit the standard, no one was doing it as well as you could?
No, it was not my plan to initially have myself in the role, but there's this is obviously only an audio podcast, but if you were to look at me sort of staring without any expression in my face, I don't think I come across the most friendly. And that's partially why I played the villain. And also, like, I'm rather tall as well. I have a bit of a physically imposing stature, So all of those things worked out quite well.
Within the show, we get to see a lot of different special effects, such as blood. And what I really enjoyed was some of the different camera angles. Was this something that Shane had to pitch to you, or he was just like, Adam, I know what I'm doing, just let me do my thing?
There was a collaboration between me and Shane. So the shot that I'm thinking of it in the opening with the Snorri cam, like the opening of the show, that was his pitch, and we had to build one of those ourselves, which is very, very cool. And a lot of it was like a trust in Shane. Oh yeah, what do you think? Will we do this? Will we do that? And it was a very collaborative sort of role, especially because he co-produced the series with me. But yeah, no, he did bring a lot of that visual flair to the show that's very, very, makes it very entertaining to watch. And we have a similar philosophy where we both like sort of the camera moving a lot because it keeps the energy up. And that would be something, again, because I watched House MD. I've been rewatching the show. I'm always in a state of rewatching that show. But one of the things that I really like about it is the camera's constantly moving and it keeps the energy up, and why the pacing of that show feels so good. And I think we tried to execute a similar thing in Midlands Mayhem.
And so how did you build the Snorri cam yourself?
So actually what we did was we built it out of PVC pipe, glue, bolts, that sort of thing. Ennis was the primary rigger for that because I'm not too technically competent with my hands and building things. But yeah, we found someone doing it online and sort of retrofitted how they would have built it from there. And yeah, it got a lot of use in the show.
Also within it, there are a lot of fight scenes. Was there a choreographer on set?
That was mostly William, actually, since he was doing all of the fight scenes. But yeah, it was a lot of a back and forth between myself and him because he wanted to keep Ennis is trained in like a fighter background. He does MMA, that sort of thing. And he wanted to keep the fights like as realistically as possible. So if we were to look at it like a side-by-side thing, he was like, oh, side of realism. I was like, oh, but what about this like sort of cool, like filmy way to do it? And doing that, I think we found a nice balance in the fights, making them sort of feel nice to watch, but also feeling like down to earth and gritty.
And whose idea was it to include the bag of chips?
That's a great question. I think that might have been in the script. I'm not 100% confident about that, but that does sound like something someone would just show up on the day with a bag of chips. It's been so long, but I think that might have been written in. That was the first throw as well when he got it. Like that was a one take.
So the ending wraps everything up quite nicely. If it was proposed to you, do you think you would come up with a season 2?
I think, you know, if you asked me this a year ago, I would have said absolutely not, no way. And I've actually, the guys have had a few good pitches for season 2, and I'm like, oh, this is actually much more workable than I thought. Because when I was going in to finish the series, I obviously was like, no, well, there's no way that we could make a season 2 after this because of plot reasons. But I did have a good pitch from Connor actually for a pilot, or not a pilot, for a season 2 opening episode. I was like, oh, that could definitely work. And I had my own as well, but mine sort of left like the comedy element out of it, whereas Connor's kept the like balance of the comedy and the drama, which I think would be the most important part for getting a Midlands season 2, that it keeps the same tonal style as the first one.
Because your project was self-funded, how did you know when to stop editing and to stop filming? Did you ever feel like there was a lot of perfectionism within you, that it just wasn't ready enough? We just have to do one more take. We have to have this, and like we have to reshoot this entire section of the episode.
Oh yeah, almost certainly. There was a lot of that. Fortunately, we lost access to a couple of locations when I probably would have reshot a scene or two. Obviously, overall, I'm very happy with it. looking back at your own work, you can see ways that things would improve, and there's definitely things that I would like to reshoot. But fortunately for my perfectionism, it's not possible.
And were you also the editor for Midlands Mayhem?
So I edited episode 1, 5, and I co-edited episode 2. So Shane edited episode 4, and one of our camera operators edited episode 2, Ewan.
And in that process, did you ever feel like you were finished, or was there someone else who's kind of lingering to be like, Adam, you're done now?
Surprisingly, with the edit, no, not really. With the sound mix, I actually think yes, because there's always like ways to improve a mix or add bits there, here and there. Fortunately, with the edit, we were able to like lock things off and be fairly happy with what we had, bar a couple of pickups that we got after principal photography. But with the sound mix, there's always like elements that you can add to the show and like give it a different vibe and atmosphere to it. And I'll share an anecdote about this. There was a scene in episode 4 that we initially had a track for, like a music track for. And what I found is it kind of pushed the scene into being way more serious, where that scene sort of had a balance of comedy and serious, like sort of tragicness. It's when Jack's watching the TV. Sorry to clarify. And what Dan did was like reverb some clanks from like pipes, I think, in the scene instead of using a track, and it made it really, really fit the vibe for it. And that sort of thing, you could go through a lot of the show and change the tone of a scene, I think, with a mix.
Is there anything that you'd like the audience to know about Midlands Mayhem?
Well, if you haven't watched it yet, there's an amazing cameo in episode 5, which is very fun if you're a Hardy Books fan. And then specifically out of Midlands Mayhem, we've got a bunch of bonus features, behind the scenes sort of stuff that you can look at on the website, as well as by the time this is out, there will be a released video that goes into much more depth about the background of Midlands and how each episode was made, how each sequence was shot. So if that sort of long breakdown, I think the runtime's at 2.5 hours for that, interests you, then you can check that out.
Where can listeners watch Midlands Mayhem if they haven't already?
Well, you can watch it on midlandsmayhem.com for free right now.
Thank you so much, Adam.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for listening. So make sure to subscribe to Film Ireland wherever you get your podcasts.